I'm surprisingly satisfied with this episode. No kidding, People Pleaser was actually quite the unexpected diamond in the rough of season 1 that caught me off guard in a lot of different ways. Compared to what most of season 1 of the reboot had to offer, this feels so far detached from most of the other episodes that it's almost as if it were an entirely different cartoon altogether. There aren't any plot holes, there aren't any major problems, there aren't any character inconsistencies. Honestly, this episode leans towards the good side of things more than the bad. It's nice, knowing that this is the final episode of the reboot's first season. By all means, it's not a very exciting episode or anything compared to, say, Electric Buttercup or Power Up Puff, but as a small slice of life story, it gets the job done, and it gets it done well. The episode begins not with a monster encounter or the girls lounging around the house, but with a random internet vlogger who's promoting a product on his channel for his viewers to see and purchase for themselves. He calls his web series Biomes with Brayden, where he discusses all the environmentally diverse types of biomes and the wonderful living organisms that live within each of them. I wonder if anyone's actually done this in real life. It's the internet, I'm sure it exists somewhere. Turns out Bubbles bought one of his build your own biome playsets herself, as she's interested in constructing one for an upcoming school project. I think this is a fitting choice for Bubbles, seeing as she's interested in both nature and animals as well as artistic hobbies. Combining the two of them for something like this just seems like pure genius. It's a match made in heaven for a character like her.
Oh, you're building a biome for science class? Which one did you get, Bubbles? I got the tiger.
In comes Buttercup as her usual snarky self, gathering her sister's attention only to brag about how she's doing an experiment on the egg drop. Although, really, she's just using it as an excuse to throw eggs at stuff. I expect nothing less coming from a character like her. Bubbles exclaims that she's having a bit of difficulty working on her school project though, so Blossom promises that she'll give her a hand with it after school that day. This then becomes the establishing scene for the remainder of the episode, as Blossom begins to encounter several other distractions during her daily routine and struggles to fulfill her promise to her sister. Cut to a few hours later, where we see Blossom in school getting ready to leave for the day when all of a sudden, Miss Keen approaches her with a request. She asks Blossom if she'd be willing to write a speech commemorating the guest visit being made by Martin Beanowitz, who's essentially stopping by the school to give the kids an assembly on running small restaurants. I guess it's a way to inspire some of the students into running their own businesses someday. I mean, that's what I'd assume anyways. By the way, Miss Keen as a character in this show is... what was that?
Unless you don't have the time, of course. Unless...
Did her animation cycle just reset there or something? Jeez, how did they miss that? Anyways, she agrees to write this speech and places it as her priority above helping out Bubbles with her science project, all the while flying by the mayor who's calling her attention from far away. He also has a request, in which he needs her to help him out with getting back the key to the city.
What is it, Mr. Mayor?
I accidentally gave the key to the city to my rival, the evil Baron von Mayersley of Citytropolis.
The local political idiot apparently has an evil rival named Baron von Mayersley in Citytropolis, the next town over. We've never heard of this guy before and probably never will again, so don't read too much into him. He's basically just the mayor with slightly spiked hair, a goatee, and a cape. You know, staples of the typical uncreative evil twin character. Now, on top of helping Bubbles out on her project and writing a speech for Miss Keen, she's also got to go around town changing every single lock because the key to Townsville apparently has a purpose unlike most cities of today. Also, if Baron von Mayersley is evil, doesn't that justify Blossom going to Citytropolis and getting the key back to its rightful owner? Or am I just expecting the logical thing to happen here? Regardless, she agrees to sacrifice even more of her time helping the mayor out instead of shifting focus towards Bubbles, even though she was the prior engagement. Suddenly, without even so much as a transition, this episode randomly cuts to Blossom meeting in a control room where she's told she needs to deliver a pizza to astronauts on board the International Space Station because they're getting... hangry?
The astronauts on the International Space Station are hungry, and we'll need you to get them this pizza before they get hangry.
Hangry?
Hungry and angry.
We're hangry! Hungry and angry!
I think this joke would have been better had it not been explained twice to the audience here. Instead, have the flight director simply say they're getting hangry and then immediately cut to the astronauts freaking out and breaking stuff. There's no need for her to prolong this joke by explaining that it's hungry and angry smushed together, and whatever humorous effect that happens to be left over is then ruined when the astronaut immediately repeats exactly what the flight director just said, thus explaining the joke a second time. If the joke has to be explained, it probably wasn't going to be funny to begin with. Meanwhile, Bubbles is still stuck at home waiting for Blossom's unlikely return, seeing as she doesn't want to make any progress without her assistance. I have to give kudos to Buttercup for her role in this, however. Even if she is pelting her sister with eggs, she still has the decency to notice that Bubbles is seriously troubled by Blossom being a no-show. It's respectable of her to try and cheer her up by helping out with her project, even if she doesn't have the best idea of how to go about it. It exemplifies Buttercup's loyalty to her sisters, because even if she can be a huge jerk sometimes, she's still a reasonable person at heart and recognizes this to be one of those scenarios. That I can appreciate, since she gets to be that minor nuisance in the beginning of the episode before really getting down to things and trying to aid Bubbles when she's feeling a little blue. Next we get You know what? No. I'm bringing attention to this now. I've been subtly hinting for the past several reviews that there's been a very obvious trend I've noticed with quite a lot of episodes of this reboot. Let's recap. There's a quick montage of each character participating in the talent competition. After a short montage of Blossom and Princess going back and forth, it's actually a montage of next we get a montage, 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 next we get a montage. I find it very interesting just how popular the use of montage was in this season. Don't get me wrong, it's a fine-tuned editing choice and even I use it sometimes, but I just thought it was worth pointing out considering how common of a practice it was here. Nothing particularly wrong with that, just thought I'd give mention to it. So yeah, next we get a montage showing Blossom flying around doing all these different tasks she somehow managed to sign up for off screen, while Bubbles and Buttercup attempt to build this biome of hers.
Here's your sports drink. Stay hydrated.
Thanks, Blossom!
Oh, Blossom. You tried. I have to say, the parallel editing going on here between Blossom helping a bunch of people out and Buttercup building this biome with Bubbles flows pretty smoothly. It's easy to follow and timed just right so that each clip shows some form of progress while not getting too far ahead of the other. During the biome half of this segment, Buttercup is finding unique and wrong solutions for building this taiga, from using soda to form the rivers and marshmallow goo for the snow. Honestly, the marshmallow goo wouldn't be a bad idea if it weren't so messy. I could actually see that working out if it was done right. However, it actually has a different role in this episode, as we'll soon see.
Pretty sweet, huh?
Yeah.
If I could go back to Blossom's portion real quick, I want to point this out. Apparently the Powerpuff Girls have their own cell service in this reboot. Who knew? As you can see, Bubbles has an emotional breakdown after she witnesses the biome she and Buttercup made completely fall into shambles, so Buttercup goes out to find Blossom and set things straight. She encounters her outside City Hall where she was conducting a choir and begins to chew her out for not coming home to lend a hand earlier that day.
I'm running important errands that I promised I do.
Promised? Like promising to help the one person whose happiness really matters and who's crying their eyes out at home right now?
The professor?
You know, to be fair, that's actually a completely reasonable response for Blossom to have here. But yeah, shortly after this little discussion, a turtleish-looking monster comes rampaging down the streets with an appearance awfully similar to that of the biome project Buttercup had created with Bubbles earlier in the afternoon. She quickly puts two and two together and realizes that the creature somehow manifested from said biome project and is now running amok thanks to her. Oh shit, is that talking dog? No, sorry. Here's where the episode just created a major missed opportunity. The explanation for why this monster comes to life is that the chemical composition of the Build Your Own Biome playset gets rearranged whenever a hefty amount of marshmallow goo is added to it. Now, aside from the fact that there's barely a connection here that makes this monster's origin make any sense whatsoever, which, okay, it's a cartoon, so that's not that big a deal, but come on, there was obviously a better explanation here. It would make perfect sense for this monster to come alive and terrorize the town had Buttercup added Chemical X to the playset instead of the goo. Would it not? I don't see why this show passes up on so many opportunities for incorporating it into its stories. I've probably pointed this out before in another review, but the show acknowledges that the girls were created from it in the opening introduction. Clearly it still exists in the reboot's universe, so why not use it?
Bubs, are you okay? No, I am not okay! Because of you!
Since when does a carton hold 13 eggs? Buttercup tells her sisters that she's got control of the situation and proceeds to chuck eggs at the monster at a rapid fire rate to try and take it down. Needless to say, it doesn't work very well at all. Blossom knocks the tar out of this monster thing so that she can subdue it for the time being, and then floats on over to Bubbles to apologize, stating that she's sorry for not showing up earlier and that she was too busy trying to make other people happy that she couldn't help the one that mattered the most to her. I gotta say, that's a good lesson. It just goes to show that you won't always be able to help everybody. Sometimes you've got to make sacrifices for some people so you can prioritize the ones that matter the most to you at a given time. I know I've had experiences where I've let someone down because I couldn't fulfill a promise due to unforeseen circumstances. Blossom is a real people pleaser in this episode. She's the kind of person that would feel guilty for not helping anyone because of her kind-hearted nature and responsibility as both a superhero and a good citizen. The episode goes to show that even someone with a do-gooder personality like her can unintentionally let people down. Even the leader of the group isn't flawless. I can really relate to this moral. I think it was executed well in a short but sweet slice of life episode. I'd be lying if I said I didn't find the following resolution to be even the least bit sweet, as Blossom encourages Bubbles once again and helps her turn the bio monster into a much nicer looking school project.
Pop quiz! What is in a taiga? Trees? Right!
I don't know, I just thought it was cool to see her helping Bubbles get back on her feet after feeling let down. The two of them complete Bubbles' biome project and the final result doesn't turn out half bad, what with the nice looking environments and Bubbles' class presentation.
In conclusion, the taiga is the world's largest biome. It stores a huge amount of carbon, and it's home to the rough-legged buzzard known for its native call.
People Pleaser once again serves to prove that this reboot can have good episodes from time to time. Now, albeit they're a bit rare, but I like to give credit where credit is due, and this is a case where I'm content because I had a good time. The entire story felt very clear and concise. There wasn't a bunch of excess clutter getting in the way of the plot progression because it focused on one major problem that split off into two different parallel branches, each of which didn't advance too far ahead of the other because the editing kept both sides moving with the same amount of momentum. Seeing both Blossom struggle with being so busy assisting everyone she possibly can, along with Bubbles and Buttercup giving an effort to get that school project done in time, was an overall pleasant experience that leaves me with a relatively positive outlook on things. Other than one or two minor details that I had pointed out earlier, I just have to say that I find it disappointing that Blossom just magically gets all these requests from out of nowhere, but that's likely in part due to the 11-minute time limit. If it had an extension in length, I'm sure we'd get to see more build up towards her half of the story, as well as a better transition into that NASA control room. To bring up the ending of the episode one more time, the decision to have Blossom end off the episode with her adding the removal of the biome from the school parking lot was a fitting way to draw it to a close. It allows everything to come full circle in a way that shows Blossom has learned her lesson and will hopefully continue to follow it in the future. People Pleaser definitely feels like a Blossom-centric episode. Her do-gooder personality fits these scenarios she's thrown into perfectly, and her inability to deliver on every single promise she makes is a completely realistic subject that many of us will have to deal with at some point in our lives. Even though People Pleaser isn't an action-heavy episode in the slightest, it still incorporates the helping the citizens aspect of the superhero's duty. And that on top of Bubbles having to work on an assignment for school brings in that education facet that the Powerpuff Girls is known for balancing as well. If this were thrown into a mix of some actual action-heavy episodes, then it would balance out just fine. No need for major changes here. It performs its function exactly how it's meant to. This was a very pleasant ending to a very pleasant episode. And with that, every single episode of the Powerpuff Girls Reboot Season 1 has been reviewed. It's been quite the journey, you guys, but I've finally finished what I had set out to do all the way back in May of 2016. I just wanted to end this review off by saying that I am very thankful for every single one of your guys' support. I wouldn't still be doing this if it weren't for that. I'll never take for granted just how lucky I am to have met so many wonderful people through doing this, whether it be fans or friends alike. And for that, I'd like to dedicate this last season review to all of you for sticking with me. It's been one hell of a ride, but thankfully this thing's still far from over. Yep, that's right. It's time to move on to Season 2. I hope to make this next batch of Powerpuff Reboot videos far better than the first season in every way I can. I'll be starting the second round off with a bang, and I'm really looking forward to it. Here's to Season 2.